Hey everyone, it is 7 in the East, it is 4 in the West, and this is your Tuesday, May 30th edition of the strategy session. I am your air traffic controller for the evening, Reed Galen. As always, joining me, the one, the only, the host of That Trippy Show, Joe Trippy. Joe, welcome.
Good to be here.
And Rick the Boss Wilson, host of The Enemies List, among other things. Rick, welcome back.
How are you, brother? Good to see you guys.
Good, good. All right, guys. Well, let's start off quick this evening. So, over the weekend, it was made known that President Joe Biden and Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy had come to the outlines of a deal to avoid a debt ceiling default, or I should say, a default on America's debt. In which, compromise is a four-letter word here, Joe, and based on the kicking and screaming of the House Freedom Caucus, which are the sort of most MAGA-y of the MAGAs, I think this must be an okay deal if they're this mad about it.
Yeah, I mean that's true, but I also think Biden's handled it so well by just not claiming credit, not just sort of holding his own and saying, and telling the press, "Hey, go look for someone else." Bragging on this isn't going to do any good to get it passed, and clearly the MAGA crowd is still crazed about this. So we'll see how McCarthy can put the votes together, and he still may be in some trouble here. I think.
Yeah, so Rick, I want to touch on two things that Joe just said there. One, which is Joe Biden has the most successful sort of quiet presidency, right, in
Right.
recent maybe living memory. Not a lot of flash, not a lot of bombast, not a lot of the big events I used to do to roll out healthcare coverage or home ownership or whatever it is. They just go in all day, every day. They don't leak, right? They just grind it out and get the work done. I saw somebody earlier today said that the president has everybody into the Oval Office. Everybody says their piece. He doesn't challenge them if something's crazy. He just said, okay, good. Everybody got their piece out. All right, let's talk about what we got to get done.
Let me tell you, Joe and Reed, you guys have both been around enough leadership at the senior level to understand when something works, it often is less dramatic than when something doesn't work. Years ago, somebody said to me that good White Houses leak on purpose, bad White Houses just leak. And these guys have been so disciplined on message, so tight on message. And I think the thing that's driving the Republicans the most crazy is when the cognitive dissonance of this whole thing gets put in their face, Reed. Because what is their portrayal to their base voters? Joe Biden's senile. He's doddering. He can't doesn't know what day of the week it is. He can barely speak. Joe Biden's 4,000 years old, and yet he goes out there and he pants these guys every time. He just runs circles around them every time they try to F with him. And I think it's really impressive that he has managed to pull off a deal that not only put Kevin McCarthy in a box for the next 2 years, if it passes, but he also put McCarthy in a position where everybody has to be reminded that Kevin is surrounded by traitors and people who hate him and would
Mm.
burn down the world to hurt the normies and the regular Republicans. Because, folks, the people in Congress right now who want this deal the most are a handful of semi sort of kind of normal Republicans, not many, the entire Democratic caucus, and that's it. A lot of the people that Kevin is closest to, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, Paul Gosar, all these lunatics, they want the fire. They want the destruction. So I think Biden has really rolled this thing beautifully and played it so smart all the way.
You
And
know,
so,
Rick,
Rick, go ahead, Joe. Go
I was
ahead.
going to say my favorite part is how the MAGA guys are all out there. Basically, the thing they're screaming at McCarthy about is being outsmarted by the
Right.
senile. I mean, it's just crazy. Here's this guy that can't complete a sentence and is senile and over the hill, and
Right.
he's outsmarted and outflanked them without a lot of noise, without a lot of bragging or anything, just quietly got it done and got it done better than they could have imagined, and that's what they're pissed about.
Well, because I mean, this is the thing, Rick. As I was watching these goons, the MAGA goons on the steps of the Capitol today, and somebody asked if they would, if they would take McCarthy out because it's only a one vote deal now, right? To put it up to a
Right.
vote to get rid of him. and none of them want to answer the question in the affirmative. And what that says to
Correct.
me is that one, none of them really wants the job because even if they think they want the job when they look in the mirror, none of them think they can actually do it because it
Right.
requires responsibility and some sort of competence. But two, I think that they just like kicking and screaming, and they would rather kick and scream. And one of
Hmm.
them, I think it was Chip Roy, right? Who he's the least of the Roy brothers, right? In succession,
Right.
like he's the one they don't even bring on the show because he's so pathetic, right? Is like, we've gotten so much done in these first 5 months, and this is all going down the drain. Like, what have you gotten done? Tell us, tell us, Chip Roy. Tell us, former chief of staff to Ted Cruz. Tell us what you've gotten done legislatively,
Right.
right? You
Right.
passed a bill with a majority. Congratulations. That is not getting something done.
Look, he has got. I mean, the bind Kevin's in is there are so few accomplishments they can brag about. It has been such an unproductive session, such a train wreck of performative garbage things like these investigations and a few of these like anti woke bills. And so the fact that the one thing that if the American people looked at it objectively and said, "Hey, wow, even the Republicans figured out we can't crash the economy. Good job, y'all." They can't take credit for it. They can't take pleasure in it because they are nihilists. They want to destroy
Hmm.
everything. And Chip Roy being angry about it, and it's like that's like champagne for me. These guys are all mad. They're all pissed off at everybody. They are all in a situation where the media structure they live inside will only reward them for being terrorists. They will only reward them for being destructive and wearing the bomb vest. And so, because of that, we're in a situation where there's no incentive for good behavior. There's no incentive to work together. It's all this very dark world. And look, there are a few progressives bitching about this thing. There are a few progressives kind of complaining, but nowhere near the number of Republicans who are
Yeah.
doing that.
No, but
Well, and
the
I
other
would say
thing,
too, Joe, is that I was about to say that is that the Democratic Party, horror of horrors, is actually united on this deal, it appears.
Right?
yeah, but the other thing though is I don't think anybody else in the presidency could have pulled this off. This is Joe Biden. It's who he is. He understands how the House and the Senate work. He understands. Obama. Going back the last time, he had never really served in the Senate or in a legislative
Right.
body, understood how all the levers work. Biden does, and I think that wisdom, that experience, really, he again not taking the bait and bragging on the success of this. He isn't going to do that. He understands how this thing's got to play out and his role in making it happen. He did everything right, and it's just again not going to get the kind of credit he deserves because of that low key way he does it. But he understands better than I don't know. Maybe LBJ understood how the Senate and the House worked.
Well,
He
and
does.
and
It
yeah, and
matters.
Rick, I mean, this is the thing too. We haven't heard about this, and maybe it happened, and maybe it didn't. But we know that this, that Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell have many of the same constituents, which are hyper wealthy individuals and gigantic
Private
corporations.
equity, hedge
Right.
funds, real estate investment trusts. Yeah.
Right. And so you could make an argument that, there's an off the record conversation between President Biden and Mitch McConnell, and McConnell calls McCarthy and says, "Listen, Kevin, you can do a lot of stupid shit, but this isn't one of them. You know, and I know that our people aren't okay with this. And you know, and I know that this works out badly for us." And McConnell and Biden have known each other for 50 frickin'
Right.
years,
Yep.
Oh yeah.
right? And McConnell and the let's say 35 sane members of his conference don't want this either, right? They don't want to default
No.
either.
Well, I don't know if you guys saw the McConnell remarks today, which he looked better than he's looked in a long time. He seemed a little more on the ball, but he was clearly signaling he wants this to go to the Senate. Now, you may have Mike Lee and Tommy Tuberville and a few of the other mutant caucus try to stop it, but uh, you know, I think McConnell will say to them, "Look, any of you who hope to get any help from the NRSC, as long as I still pull breath into my lungs, you better get on board." And maybe
Well,
Mike
I
Lee
mean,
doesn't
and
need
it's
that, but
if it's 67 votes for a cloture on debate, they'll get that, right?
Yeah.
Between the 51
Yeah.
ish
Let's
Democrats. I
call
mean,
yeah, let's say McConnell can only pull 40, but he'll get Schumer to pull the rest of them across the line. And so really the losers here are the chaos caucus, and I think the country's the big winner, honestly.
yeah.
And if it holds up in the current structure, the fact that Biden got a 2-year closure on this thing, which means it carries through
Hmm.
the election, they don't get to do another like bomb vest act at the end of 2024 and say, oh, now we've got to blow up the budget in September, October of 24 before the election. I think this thing was structured pretty brilliantly.
Well, and so, Joe, let me ask you this because, we started saying in January, and this is one of those times where, again, hoping that this thing passes and that the president signs it, right? That the MAGAs would take us off the cliff if they had the opportunity. No one is more happy to be wrong about that than me, right? If this does actually get done. But let me ask you this: does it play into what is still largely a fiction held by too many people we know, whether or not it's in politics, finance, or the media, that look, it's really all okay. Everything's really normal. They were always going to get this thing done. It wasn't necessarily true that they were going to get it
No,
all done.
No.
So how do you think it sort of does it re-entrench some people in this idea that oh, it's really not that bad?
No, I don't think so because the loudest voices are still trying to tank it, right? Any way they can. Chip Roy's
right.
example of it. I just think in the and by the way, this isn't over yet. I mean,
Yeah.
they're now
Oh
threatening.
no, no. I mean, we shouldn't take too much of a victory
Yeah,
lap yet
yeah,
on
they're
this.
already out starting to threaten, that they're going to take McCarthy out. I don't know. It's still not clear to me whether he actually survives this, even if particularly if this actually passes in its current form. So no, I think the terrorists and the hostage takers are still going to hold McCarthy's feet to the fire, and it's going to be out there and plain, out in the open, and it's going to be clear to people. I think,
Oh,
yeah, look, they'll be whining on the left, but I think in the end, everybody, the Democrats are really unified, and this is really still showing big schisms, even within MAGA about how to handle this. It's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out, but there's going to be a roller coaster here for the next 2 or 3 days. Even the Rules
Well,
Committee.
and Rick, somebody wired something into Thomas Massey's bank accounts because Thomas Massey, who's as goonish as they come, is on board with this deal. I believe
right.
he's on the rules committee and would be the deciding vote,
I
right?
suspect that somebody in the private equity world got a call from Jeff Miller, who is, of course, folks, if you don't know, he is Kevin McCarthy's number one best boy. He's his lobbyist, he's his fixer, he's his consigliere. And I'm sure that somebody in private equity world got a call from Jeff and said, "Hey, hook Thomas up with $500,000. We need to close this thing up so you guys are protected." Um, and that's the thing that
Not that
we've
we're
pointed.
accusing anybody of pay to play, of course.
Oh no, that would never
No.
happen with Jeff Miller. Never in a million years could that ever happen with that pinnacle of moral probity.
Mhm.
Um, but I mean, guys, I mean, we've been talking about this for a long time. McCarthy to win the speakership, which is, guys, he cared. And Reed said this when he cared about the portrait in the office, not about the real responsibilities of the job. So to get that job, he made deals with the craziest of the crazies. He made Faustian bargains, deals with the devil. And the thing about deals with the devil is the devil always cheats and the devil always collects. So you've got Matt Gaetz, Green, Boebert, Gosar, Biggs, a
Mhm.
whole bunch of the rest who aren't on the rules committee and who are insane and who would love to have a few days to torture Kevin, and try to make this thing drawn out a little more. I think they'll fail, but I think it's a fatal sort of bleed out for McCarthy. He doesn't get to go around again to them one more time and go, "Hey, hook me up because I'm the guy that can take you to victory in 2024. I'm the guy who's going to help your agenda get through." I don't think he can do that now because this is really where a lot of the red lines were. Gates, I have heard especially, was obsessed with telling McCarthy, "You don't get a debt ceiling deal. You must not do a debt ceiling deal with Biden." He's doing it.
Yeah, and I would say this is that I assume that there'll be another budget fight at some point, right? Where and I don't know if they've wrapped that up into a continuing resolution, but at some point, if there isn't a budget deal, then they'll force us into a shutdown or whatever if they leave McCarthy around.
Right.
If not, God knows what happens. But look, everybody knock on the wood in front of you and hope that this all gets done. All right, let's move to another group of people who live in an alternative universe. There is a group called No Labels. They consider themselves a centrist organization, moderate, whatever it is. They have been pushing this idea of an independent candidacy in 2024 for president
Right.
because the parties are, quote, too extreme. And in conversations that we have had, Rick, the both sidesism, the false equivalency, not only between a Joe Biden and a Donald Trump, but even between the parties, is really ridiculous. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not going to be one. But as I told them at the time, and I think you did too,
Yep.
um, the Republican Party is an anti-democratic force in the country, and the Democratic Party is the only pro-democracy party we got left. So why would you do this? Why would
Well,
you do
look, I
this
mean,
now? And as I've said before, when the house is on fire and you need to put it out, why would you put an addition on the back? Right?
the biggest thing for people to understand about no labels is this alleged plan they have to run a third party candidate is not an alleged plan. It's a real plan. They're going to put Joe Manchin on their ticket. They're going to put him into states where Biden can't afford to lose conservative Democrats. Their idea is to run Manchin as a conservative Democrat in a lot of purple states and take the election from Joe Biden and the Democrats and hand it to Donald Trump. Now, they claim up and down this isn't their plan. But let me tell you, folks, let me tell you where their money comes from. Their money comes from primarily a bunch of very, very, very wealthy Republicans in the energy, oil, and gas sector in Dallas, Texas, and a bunch of private equity Republicans in New York City. And they want nothing more than Donald Trump Part Two because of oil and gas exploration tax credit and because of the overall tax cuts that Trump handed them in 2017. No Labels is a scam of the highest order. The people who run it have this beef with the Democratic Party that Joe can tell you much more about than I ever could. But they have a
Yeah.
beef with the Bidens and the Clintons and the
Yep.
Obamas, and they hate them all. And they're going to do everything they can to blow this election up and hand it to Donald Trump. And over at Lincoln, we're in a kind of running gun battle with them because we called their BS a long time ago, and it's important we do it across platforms. And anybody who wants to learn about more about this, we're happy to share more about it because they are profoundly dangerous to the future of this democracy.
So,
No, and
Joe, let me say this, Joe. Let me play devil's advocate.
sure.
But the country doesn't want a Biden Trump rematch, right? The country is the great middle, right? Where 77% of people say they want somebody more centrist, that they are sick of the partisanship and the fighting amongst the two parties, that this is the time when finally, at long last, right, our long national nightmare of Republicans and Democrats after 160 years will be over.
Yeah, well, as Trig V. Olson tells us, is, you fight the war you're in, the battle you're in, not the one you want to be in. And the reality is, Joe Biden's going to be the nominee of the Democratic Party. He should be. He's been a successful president. We just talked about all that how he got this thing done,
Right.
and Trump is going to be the nominee of the Republican Party. I mean, it's just if you got to look at the new Monmouth poll that came out today. It has him 77% approval rating, 17% unfavorable rating. This is
That's Trump with Republicans.
17, yeah, with
Yeah.
Trump with Republicans. Okay, and like something like 49% think he's the only guy that can beat Biden, and another 18% or so think he's probably the only guy that could beat Biden. I mean, these are Republicans. That's not good. He's going to be their nominee. And
Yeah,
in
let's
that,
not pretend. Let's not pretend any other. And that's
yeah.
the thing that
So,
that also pisses me off about no labels is they have continually made the case that Trump and Biden are morally equivalent and politically
Right.
equivalent. It's
yeah.
outrageous. It's
Yes.
insanity. No sensible,
Well,
cordate person could believe that.
I
and
mean,
well, that's the point I
Joe,
was
Joe
about to make.
is 75 year wait is Joe Manchin 75-year-old coal baron from the most Trumpy state in the country is he the generation and the leadership that that the middle of America is looking for?
No, another poll came out. I mean, first of all, No Label's own poll shows him taking more votes away from Biden than from Trump, and
Right.
Right.
actually moves Trump into a 5 point lead over Biden with
Right.
the people that Manchin takes away. And there's
Which
another
is,
poll that shows the same thing. I
yeah.
mean, there's every time it's been tested, it proves they're full of shit. I mean, it just proves it. It can't not do what they're saying, and in the end, yeah, because sooner or later, people are going to ask. Generation Z is going to ask, "Where are you on climate change and on all that stuff?" And oh yeah, he's going to be the fossil fuel guy, and the coal guy is going to take them to take. No, it's going to be conservative white men, Democrats. That's who he gets, and that's a group that has that the few that bleed to Biden are what we need, and the women that bleed to him from who
Yeah.
can't stomach Trump. You're the thing that they don't get is, look, if this were, I don't know, Romney versus Hillary or something, and there you wanted to do a third part, and give people, everybody knows that democracy itself will be sustained no matter how that third
Hmm.
person affects the race. But to invoke, when you look at George Wallace, Ralph Nader, Ross Perot,
Jill
um,
Stein.
Bill Stein, that the
Strom
element of
Thurmond in
those
1948 with the
Yep.
Dixiecrats.
exactly when you
Dixiecrats.
now that third thing pulling more votes away from Biden, because let's face it, the insanity, the crazy, the cult, they're not going to split. This is
No.
this is like the authoritarian movement that wants
Right.
wants everything. They're not going to split. Who's going to split? You're splitting the sane, pro democracy, the reasoned voters out there. You're splitting them, and there are some in the women in the Republican Party who've never voted anything but Republican in their lives,
Right.
who have voted in 2020 and 2022 in different districts
Right.
for the Democrat for the first time. We need to keep them. We can't afford to split that vote up. And that's what no labels, wittingly or unwittingly, and I'm sure it's some of both. I think there's people in there who wittingly
You're
or
far more gracious than I am.
yeah, but they are playing directly into a disaster for democracy itself. Putting it
Yep.
back in Trump's hands, that's
Well,
it's lights out if that happens, and they're messing
yeah,
with it. I mean,
right.
I mean, to gamble with that is insane.
Right. So
Right.
Rick,
Don't
I
play
mean,
with
this is
radioactive material.
Yes.
right. So Rick, I mean, this is one of the other parts too, which is they're selling this to their donors and quote unquote to their movement, which is like 80 guys who are wealthy enough to fund some
Yeah.
silliness like this, right? On a vision of the world that does not exist anymore. It is never going to exist again, right? This sort of compassionate
It's that all we
conservative,
are saying is give peace a chance bullshit.
right?
And they're saying, oh, well, we can work together on bipartisan. No, no, you can't. Because you know what? It's not the problem solvers caucus that is in control of Congress. It's the lunatics. It's the crazy people on
and
the
they're
right.
attacking and they're attacking the same people in the problem solvers caucus
Which
Right.
because
And
blows me
so
away.
some
so
of them are
Reed,
stepping
so
you know,
for
up.
yeah, yeah.
Right. So for those of you out there, so there's this thing that No Labels has been very proud of called the Problem Solvers Caucus. It's about, I don't know, 20 Republicans and Democrats, the quote unquote moderates, whatever's left of them on the Republican Party. Um, a couple of Democrats in this Problem Solvers Caucus came out and said that the No Labels plan is a bad idea for
Mhm.
2024. No Labels subsequently, immediately, and viciously attacked members of their own caucus because they
They
were so
started
upset about
spending
this.
money to put calls into his district.
Right. And so it's that's the other part too, is that I don't think even temperamentally, intellectually, politically, Rick, these folks even know what they're doing, right? They're going to have
Yeah.
a convention next April in Dallas, but they even said on one of their own calls they haven't figured out the mechanism by which they're going to nominate Joe Manchin. right?
Right.
On another call,
You
Nancy
got to be a
Jacobson,
party to
who's
nominate somebody.
right. On one of their calls, Jacobson, the founder of No Labels, said, "Well, if we think it's going to help Trump, we'll pull the plug in August of 2024." Of course, by then it will be someone else's campaign, say Joe Manchin's, and he gets to decide whether or not he quote unquote pulls the plug. And then I think we heard from somebody else, Joe, that oh, you know what? Worst comes to worst, it goes to Congress, and our
Oh,
problem solvers guys will make sure it's the right person, which is either the height of ignorance about how the process works, which it is, guys, by delegation. That means every state gets one vote, right?
Right.
Not 435 members of the House and 100 members of the Senate. Every state gets one vote. So it's a 50 vote deal. Right now, there are
Right. So let's say
26
you have
Republican
one guy
delegations and 24 Democratic delegations.
right.
yeah,
So let's
and
say you
no
have one
independent
guy like a
delegation.
Don Bacon in
Right.
Nebraska who is going to say, "Oh, I'm going to be with Joe Manchin because I love Nancy Jacobson and no labels." Well, the rest of the delegation's going to go, "Fuck you," and they're all going to vote for Trump.
Yeah,
It's
no,
not going to work out the way they
it,
think.
taking this thing to the House, which is the likeliest scenario if No Labels has any success at all.
Right.
I mean, the likeliest scenario for them is not that they're going to get 270 electoral votes. It's going to be that they screw up the electoral college in these 5 or 6 states that
Right.
they're targeting with their money and Mansion, and then it goes to the House. And Rick, as you point out, it's 50 states, one vote each, and there's 26 Republican states that will declare,
Yep.
Right.
That's the
cast their
ball
one
game right
vote for
there.
the Republican and that's going to be Trump. There are so many different ways. The likelier thing, though, frankly, is what we're
Trump just
seeing in the
wins.
polls, where Manchin or whoever it is, grabs some 9, 10 points, something like that, but they're mostly from Biden giving giving Trump those
Yep.
electoral votes. But there's absolutely no scenario. I haven't heard or seen anything. They have no real plan. And even the other interesting thing is everybody they've suggested Newsom. We've heard, you've seen them suggest Whitmer in Michigan, Manchin. Everybody, Cinema, everybody they suggest at the top of the ticket just happens to be a Democrat. You never hear
Weird.
them say, yeah, weird. You never hear them say, "Hey, what about Adam Kinzinger or who, somebody from
Right. Nothing that
Jake,
would hurt
whoever."
Trump ever appears in their plans.
No,
It's just, it's
yeah,
quite a
it's
coincidence.
really,
My
yeah,
my guess
it's
is if Governor Whitmer did take their call, which I doubt she did,
no,
she
she
probably
won't.
said, "Lose my number."
Yes,
Right?
no,
Don't
no.
call here again.
I think
I would be
most of
quite
most
confident of that assertion.
Yeah,
I
I
would
think
bet
most
that
of
is
the
the
people
case.
they run up the flagpole would have said that to him. I don't know that Manchin has. It sounds like he's interested, but we'll see.
Well, and just the last piece of this too is, they've been the one thing, and we've seen, and you can always tell when somebody gets super upset about something what they're most worried about, right, guys, is they have not had to disclose their donors, right? They have
Yeah.
so far found a way to
Right.
keep their donors secret. But I've seen a legal analysis in the last week that says, given the fact that they founded a no labels party in Rick's state of Florida, which
Yep.
said that it is only in existence to nominate
A
a
presidential
candidate
candidate.
on the no labels line, right? That they might indeed be a party, and if they are in fact functioning as a party committee, guys, not to get too nerdy on you, you gotta release your donors, right?
Yep.
Party committees can't keep
Sorry.
their donors
Way it
secret,
works.
and
Yep.
That
this
is the
is
way it
where
works.
the whole thing, in my mind, guys, could fall apart, which is I'm sure there's a whole bunch of guys on that list who they're only doing this because they were probably promised your name would never get out, right? Your name would never get
Yep.
out. Now, if you have to do something on the idea, Joe, as we wrap this up, that you were going to do such a momentous thing, but you were going to do it for, say, 10 million bucks and no one would ever find out about it, do you think you should have been doing it in the first place?
No, and also you're doing it because you want to save democracy. I mean,
Right.
wouldn't you want your name all over that? I mean,
Right.
it's
Right.
it's ridiculous.
If
It's
that's your sell, if
ridiculous.
that's your sell that
Yeah.
you're saving democracy, you'd brag about it.
Right. Let's
Right.
hide it though. It's not.
They know.
None of it makes
And folks,
sense.
just one last thing on this before we change the subject. Just so everybody watching knows, One of their major donors is Harlan Crow, who is the sugar
Mhm.
daddy for Clarence Thomas. We'll leave it there.
Right. All right. So moving on to yet another bad idea is a guy named Josh Hawley. He is a senator from the state of Missouri. He is one of these guys who claims to be, a bruiser, a brawler. He went to a hoity-toity private school in St. Louis, or was it St. Louis? Yeah. I think he went to Yale. He taught at St.
Yeah,
Paul's, the 700-year-old school in England, right? He's got great hair. Not afraid of a tight black t-shirt. He recently wrote a book about masculinity and how American masculinity is dying. And if you haven't read it, I commend to you David French's column in this weekend's New York Times. David is a much more eloquent writer than I could ever hope to be. But I spent a lot of time thinking about this over the weekend, which is for guys like Hawley or Ted Cruz or Donald Trump or Tucker Carlson. Masculinity is just about being a troll.
right.
It's not in my mind anyway. Look, even if it's we're three middle-aged white guys, right? Like it doesn't. Their version of manliness does not comport in any way with mine. And Joe, I'd love to get your sense of it. We all have daughters, right? This is a guy who was such a tough guy that he gave the fist to the January 6th insurrectionists when he was outside, and as soon as they stormed the building, he literally went running for his life.
Yeah, he's running around like a coward, which is what he is, and that's his read on masculinity is that it's all facade, it's all fake. Um,
Right.
it's just
It's a big troll.
yeah, it's all it is, and the reality is that it's all projection. Everything that guy does is just like attacking, I think, his own deep seated fears of himself,
Yeah.
his own problem with his own masculinity. I mean, he reeks of that. I thought the French column that you point, we should, people really need to read it because it was a masterful takedown of Holly and manhood,
Yeah.
his version of it anyway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Rick, I mean, I thought about this too, which is, is if you have a son or sons, right? Is is what Josh Hawley shows you, not what he says, but what he shows you,
Hmm.
Right.
what you
Yeah,
would want to tell your son? If what Ted
As you
Cruz
guys know,
shows you that that the guy that attacked your wife viciously, right, is now someone you abase yourself before.
right.
Donald Trump, right, claims to be this macho guy. Never been in a fist fight in his life. He lives in
No.
gilded palaces and wears tiny bathrobes and orange pancake makeup. Like this is not the normal definition of any sort of masculinity. Yet Joe's point, it's like they're all hiding from it.
Let me tell you something. Josh Hawley has no familiarity with power tools or equipment of any kind. That is not a guy. I mean, his version of masculinity is like, I've triumphed over you in the debate club, sir. And that's all fine and good. I was in the debate club too, but I also can drive a backhoe and a tractor and a combine and anything that flies or swims. This is a guy who acts like this writing a book that's going to get talked about on Newsmax and on Right Wing Telegram is identifying a real crisis in America. And the crisis isn't masculinity in this country, it's douchebaggery. The
Mhm.
crisis is conflating the stoic and moral responsibilities of being a man with the jack off trolling bullshit of Jack Posobiec and Seb Gorka and Steve Bannon and Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz and this whole fucking catalog of guys who, honest to God, don't have the testosterone together in one bucket, to move the needle. They're all a bunch of cosseted, elite, DC, isolated. I'm not going to say the word I'm going to say because I'm not going to blow up our ratings, but these guys are kittens. They're not
yeah.
tigers. They are
And
not, they're not. I
But
mean, Josh Hawley ran like a dog with its dick on fire out of the Capitol that day because he was scared of the mob he was encouraging.
I mean, Joe, this is the other thing too, though, is to think about this, which is, let's switch to having daughters, right?
yeah,
If you have a daughter, would you, and your daughter showed up with one of these guys at your home, you'd be like, son, you gotta go.
yeah,
Honey,
yeah.
go inside.
It's
I'm sorry,
yeah. What are you
you're not talking
thinking?
to this guy anymore because why would you ever subject your daughter or allow your daughter to be subjected to, oh, you know what? You get to live in the house. right? You get to live by my rules. Like this is 2023, right? I got three independent women in my house, and two of them are, not even 13 yet, right? And the idea that like anybody would any dad in their right mind would ever want their daughters to be within 1,000 miles of these guys is beyond me.
No, it's crazy. I mean, that's the it's like he's pleading. He's upset that not every man in America is John Wayne, and
Right.
we're not
John
getting
Wayne's
into
real first
fifty.
name was Marion, by the way.
Yeah, but my
Yeah,
point
and
is, he's as
John Wayne
far
in
as you can.
private was not John Wayne in the yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
go
but
ahead.
my
Go
that's
ahead.
actually my whole point. He's Holly's like is so far away from being John Wayne himself. It's like it's laughable, but he wants to keep presenting like it's the big fist in the air as he goes rolling by, and it just should crack people up because it's a fantasy world that doesn't exist, and why would you want your daughter to be in a household with someone like him who's going to dictate every piece of her future, including what she can do. It's insane.
I mean,
And
y'all,
but
uh,
I guess some of the MAGA folks still eat it up even from him.
I don't know about you, Joe, but Reed and I in our misspent youths, both of us have been in a bar fight or two and a scrap or
Yeah.
two. And I promise you, Josh Hawley has never had anything hit him harder than a sparring coach at his ladies taekwondo class.
No, I mean, I was thinking about that, Rick. I was thinking about that very thing today. 25 years ago, almost exactly, I lost a bar fight in Austin, Texas, in the bar
Right.
that I worked in. I was working the door, and it was last call was like 1:45 in Austin, and this guy shows up. I was working the door, and to your point about misspent youth, Rick, I had been drinking too. It was a different time, gang, and my job was to check bad fake IDs. And this guy shows up, and the woman that was working with me was the daughter-in-law of the gal that owned the place.
right.
And he said some really awful things to her, and she broke down in tears and ran away. And I walked up to him. I said, "You can't talk to her like that." And he gives me one of these. Goes, "Aren't you cute?" And I give him one of these. I go, "Aren't you cute?" And the next thing I know, I've got a bottle of Bud Light over the face, and I'm bleeding everywhere. And right, and literally a brawl breaks out. Right, like
Yep.
my buddies jump on him, his buddies jump on my buddies, and the next thing you know, I'm like, smoking a cigarette in the back of a Honda Accord, waiting for the ambulance to come pick me up. Um, I don't want to do that again, right? But it was the right fight at the right time, even
Holly
if the
would have ran to the
circumstances were
door.
bad.
He would
Right.
have run to
Yeah.
the door. You know, that's a
Holly would have
And
been like,
and
I don't like being in a bar. It's loud and
yeah.
sticky.
right. He had to go drink a Cosmo somewhere very quiet.
Right.
Right.
But the point is that whether or not it's a goofy bar fight in your early 20s or
Right.
something you truly believe in, sometimes you have to fight for things that are not easy, that you may not win, but the principle of the thing says this is where I draw my line. And what we know about these guys is that they are all transactional and cynical. They don't believe in
Yeah.
anything, right? They
Right.
don't believe in anything
Listen,
except
if
that
Ben
their own
Shapiro and
power and
Josh Hawley are the
self-aggrandizement.
right, if Ben Shapiro and Josh Hawley and Steven Crowder are your paragons of manhood, reset your expectations to zero
Right.
because it's all
It's
part of this
pathetic.
performative right wing media machine bullshit, and and I don't think that there's a I don't think that there's a future for this argument in a lot of ways. Look, young men have a ton of problems in this country. They're
Right.
real
Yeah.
problems that young men
Yeah.
have in this country. Unbelievable alienation and isolation, and the poison of some of the social media that kids get exposed to way too early in life. Young men
Right.
do have a crisis of having strong male role models in their lives, but the strong male role model in your life is a father or a stepfather or a husband or a brother or a friend who's willing to go, hey, by the way, don't do that. That's not how one acts. That's not how a man behaves. That's not
Yeah.
how we live our lives. Instead of saying, the more you troll, the more you own the libs, the more you hurt people's feelings, the more you act like the most, egregious, homophobe or racist in the room, the more points you score. There are young men in this country in a profound crisis, and none of this bullshit from guys like Josh Hawley is going to solve it.
No, and I think Joe, I think what Rick said is 100% spot on, right? I mean,
Yes,
you know,
absolutely.
depression rates are up, suicide rates are up. They are tailor made for the kind of stuff that is being pushed out across, you know, all whatever or not
The
it's 4chan or
poison
8chan,
Yeah,
telemark, Telegram.
telegram.
Excuse me. You're right. It absolutely is poison. And you know, for me, the thing I take some of this back to Trump, which is he gave so many people license, both as a
yeah,
candidate and then as president,
yeah,
to be their, as Stuart says,
That's
their
right.
worst selves.
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. The very worst iteration of
Now you
themselves.
ask like what you want your daughter. You want somebody who's going to be grateful that there are strong independent women out there that they can support, that you give them the support that they need, you know, not someone who clearly fears them and believes that somehow men are being, you know, are diminished by strong women, and that's what Holly just sort of, he sort of reeks of that. I don't know the
Yeah.
better way to
It's
say it.
yeah, look, I think it goes back to what Rick said. I think it's a
Yeah,
fundamental lack of self-esteem and
yeah,
self-worth, which again is a problem. Um, right now, the issue is that there's a lot of them who are taking this stuff on board, and it leads to really, really bad stuff, and we've seen it. And I would say this, Josh Hawley is no man, and your pronouns are kiss my ass. I think you should probably kiss your own ass, and leave the rest of us alone. All right, guys, before we get out of here. Rick, what are you looking at before you take off?
Well, I will be missing in action next week, folks. I'm going to be away for the week, but I am watching right now the final plays on the debt ceiling. I'm also watching a lot of the private equity money. I heard there was a big stir in the system today because Ron DeSantis came out against the debt deal, and his entire financial constituency is private equity, hedge funds, Wall Street, Silicon Valley, all of whom, if we don't do the debt ceiling, are going to be hurt dramatically and tremendously. So that's what I've got my eye on.
Joe, how about you?
same. With a little bit more looking at McCarthy, I still think he's on his way out.
I
I just
agree,
don't see
Joe.
how he's
I
going.
agree.
But I'm really watching the debt ceiling and see how that plays out and how it impacts McCarthy and leadership in the House.
Um, I'm looking at a couple of things. One is down in Texas, where Attorney General Ken Paxton, who's
Oh
been
my
under
God.
federal
Yes.
Yeah,
I'm
indictment
sorry.
how did
for
we
like
not
Yeah.
half
talk
a
about that?
decade, was impeached by a Republican Texas House of Representatives. It now goes to the Senate. He is suspended from office while that happens. Will be interesting to see if Uber MAGA Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, who runs the Senate, you know, really allows this to be. But it was funny, guys, that you know, Paxton was complaining that there were, you know, and his defenders, there were no witnesses, there was no questioning, there was no this, there was no that, just 20 articles of impeachment. What kind of process is this? Paxton's calling these members on the floor, threatening retribution. Like, and then he said on Steve Bannon that he prevented 2.5 million ballots from being counted,
Right.
so
He
Joe Biden
basically said
won't
he,
win.
he stole the election for Trump.
Right. So,
Yeah,
like,
he made it
you
into
know,
another another felony. It's
right.
great.
So maybe we found the line. But along those same lines, it turns out that there is maybe more trouble for Donald Trump down at Mar-a-Lago with these classified files. And he is now asking people to find the names of the Justice Department officials and the FBI agents who were involved in the search of his property so that he can make their lives a living hell, which I think also goes to show
What
you
could
just exactly
possibly
what.
go wrong?
Right. So, guys, is always exciting. Joe, Rick, I want to thank you. Rick, have a great week off. Joe, we'll see you next time.
Thank
And
you.
everybody else, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Bye,
Bye
folks.
bye.
Everybody.